Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Barakahak Wadash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. Double honors to the apostles and elders, the great millstone who rule and teach well. And peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure to the end. This is the brother Ra'aya with another video, and I'm going to start it off in Daniel chapter 2, in the latter half of the chapter, where it deals with the statue of a man made of different metals that King Nebuchadnezzar of the Neo-Babylonian Empire saw in his dream, and that the prophet Daniel interpreted. And that statue represented the different heathen kingdoms that would rule before the kingdom of heaven. And that head of gold was the Neo-Babylonian Empire. As you can see, the Blue Letter Bible recently has labeled what these different parts of the statue mean. And with my few years in the truth, I remember when the Blue Letter Bible didn't label what the different parts of that statue meant. We can clearly see that the prophets have had an effect on every aspect of this society. The main prophets of Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai, if the spirit's dealing with you, is clearly GMS or Great Millstone, as well as the brothers that come in the spirit of GMS. But then we go into the arms and the breasts of silver, which is speaking of the Medo-Persian Empire. And then you have the thighs and the belly of brass, the Grecian Edomite empires started by Alexander of Macedon, so-called Alexander the Great. In the fourth kingdom, the legs of iron, the ancient pagan Edomite Roman Empire. And then, well, we'll read verse 40 on down, but then it goes into the last leg of that statue, those feet of iron mixed with miry clay. But this is Daniel chapter 2, verse 40. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things. And as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. Verse 41, and whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron. And this is the last leg of the Roman Empire, the reincarnated Roman Empire, which is known today as that NATO-EU alliance that the U.S. is a part of, the so-called Western world, which had its beginnings during the Renaissance or the rebirth, when Esau Edom, the so-called white man, started coming back into power after the Dark Ages. The kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay, and as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And it's pretty straight to the point. This kingdom is partly strong and partly broken. That part of iron, the stronger part, being the stronger nations such as Germany, France, Britain, because even though Britain left the EU, Britain is still a part of NATO. And then your weaker parts, that part of clay, which is traditionally known as the pigs nations, Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, and Spain. And as it says back up in verse 41, the kingdom shall be divided. And if you've been keeping up with geopolitics and, just current events, even though, these European nations on the mainstream like to seem like they're on board with the United States of America and a lot of their agendas that they push, hey, behind the scenes, a lot of them are having issues with the U.S. being at the head of this structure, because they're the ones that feel the blowback from whenever the United States of America does anything, and they have to follow suit with it. Just look at the wars in Afghanistan, the wars in Iraq, the Syrian civil war, or the Libyan civil war. It's Europe that's having to deal with that refugee crisis, which has a whole host of issues affecting that country. And then more recently, this whole situation with Ukraine. Yeah, on the surface, they're showing solidarity and helping the poor, small nation of Ukraine fight against the the totalitarian powers of Russia, and they put sanctions on Russia. But behind the scenes, a lot of these European nations are hurting because they rely on a lot of natural resources, oil and natural gas that comes from Russia, much more than the United States of America. And this is further causing division within this kingdom of those iron toes mixed with miry clay. And that's what I'll be going into with this video. I'm going to start it off with an article on RT.com titled, Germany Needs Nord Stream 2, AFD MP says. Resuming energy flows from Russia will help stave off deindustrialization, Stefan Koder says. And right now, Germany is in the EU, is the top developed nation in the EU, hey, that part of iron, and it's also the nation that's having the worst economic downturn right now. I believe Germany is actually in a recession. Germany needs to bring the surviving branch of the Nord Stream pipeline online and resume gas imports from Russia, Bundestag MP Stefan Koder told TASS news agency on Saturday. According to the lawmaker, abandoning Russian energy and replacing it with alternate gas supplies has been a mistake because, again, a lot of these European nations heavily relied on Russian natural resources, but with following after the United States of America, another part of that iron in this kingdom of iron mixed with miry clay, hey, they're the ones feeling the blowback from U.S. adventurism abroad. What the Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, is happy about is devastating for companies and private consumers, Koder, who is also a member of the German Parliamentary Committee on Energy and Climate Protection, said, referring to Scholz's earlier praise of Germany's efforts to reduce dependency on Russian energy. The surge in gas prices leads to the deindustrialization of Germany. To ensure competitiveness, Germany should agree to purchase gas through the surviving branch of the Nord Stream pipeline, Koder stated. And hey, there was that whole issue a couple of years ago with the sabotage of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which best believed the U.S. had a heavy hand in causing, because that was going to be a very strong economic, link between Germany and Russia, which would take, Germany's reliance away from the U.S. and more towards Russia. And the U.S. couldn't have that, have one of their top allies in Europe, moving more towards the east and away from the west. Nord Stream is a gas route between Russia and Germany that runs through the Baltic Sea. It consists of the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines, each comprised of 2 separate branches. Germany once received Russian gas through Nord Stream 1, while Nord Stream 2 was never certified due to bureaucratic setbacks. Both pipelines were damaged and shut down last year in an incident widely considered to be sabotage. As a result, Germany lost direct access to Russian gas, which once covered around half of the country's energy needs, so a very substantial amount. And hey, those winters in Europe get very cold. One of the 2 branches of Nord Stream 2 survived, but the German authorities have not resumed the certification process due to political tensions with Moscow over the Ukraine conflict. And while you got a lot of these puppet leaders, still cheerleading for sanctions against Russia and this NATO war against Russia, a lot of these citizens are turning against it because they're the ones feeling the main brunt and the blowback from it. And that's just going to lead to more civil unrest and, divisions in this kingdom of iron mixed with miry clay. According to Koder, this needs to change as Germany currently pays much more for gas from alternate sources than it used to pay for Russian gas. And let's see, now that the Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 has been sabotaged by the US, who Germany's mainly getting their natural gas from now. Russian gas is profitable and environmentally friendly, which is not the case with our current supplies, primarily liquefied natural gas from the US. Germany pays 3 to 4 times more for these supplies, but gas from the US produced by the fracking method does not meet our environmental standards, he stated. And hey, on a long enough timeline, fracking is not sustainable. It's another pyramid scheme, another Ponzi scheme to make a quick buck, and it further ruins the environment. So at the what's that word I'm looking for? So at the at the cost of throwing their allies under the bus, the United States of America is willing to do anything to, stay on top and make sure, Russia isn't a equal or a greater power than themselves. And what this is ultimately going to lead to is America's, Western European allies at some point during World War III completely turning against the United States of America and allying themselves with Russia and her allies. And they're all together going to shoot nuclear missiles onto the United States of America. And, besides these current events, these wars in the Middle East, which have led to these refugee crises, the sabotaging of lucrative economic deals with Russia and China, and recently this whole Ukraine situation, the U.S. has a history of meddling in her European allies' affairs so they can demonize, Russia in the East and keep those European countries in her corner. Just look up a book called Gladio. It has another title to it, but the main title of the book is Gladio, Gladio, which deals with during the Cold War from the late 1940s to the fall of the Soviet Union in the early 90s. The U.S., in order to keep her Western European allies from being sympathetic to communism, would set up FFs, FALSEFLAGSs, and have the U.S. would have operatives, mercenaries, CIA type stuff, black operations, black ops, pose as communists and commit terroristic acts in Europe so that they could blame the Soviets and the communists, and it would keep Europe in that Western capitalist mindset. So again, the U.S. is willing to do anything to keep that grip on power and keep her allies from going towards the East, from going towards Russia or China. But it's ultimately going to backfire. And hey, even though on the surface it seems like America's European allies are in solidarity and helping Ukraine, behind the scenes, a lot of them are still receiving, natural resources, oil, natural gas, and other things from Russia because they heavily depend on Russia more than they do the United States of America. It's not going to be the U.S. that if they don't get enough, natural gas and oil to heat their homes during the winter, it's not going to be U.S. citizens freezing due to a lack of Russian gas. It's going to be those European Edomites, which brings me to my next bit of information on Lena Petrova's YouTube channel titled Caught Red-Handed, EU or European Union buys tons of Russian resources from third countries, decoupling failed. As we'll see in this clip, even though the West is in solidarity with Ukraine and we're behind those sanctions against Russia and we're not taking their resources, behind the scenes, they're taking those Russian resources through third parties, third countries, as it's about to go into. Say India, still buys oil and natural gas from Russia. What? We come to find out that countries in the EU buy oil and natural gas from India. So do you think it's Indian natural gas and oil they're getting? No, it's Russian natural gas and oil they're getting. So again, and whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. And what does it say in Mark chapter 3, verses 24 to 25? And if a kingdom be divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And if a house be divided against itself, that house cannot stand. And as we're about to see in that clip on Lena Petrova's YouTube channel, and as we read in that article on RT.com with German officials in the government saying that we need to go back to dealing with Russia to get those natural gas and other resources, this kingdom of the iron toes mixed with miry clay, that NATO EU alliance that the US is a part of and at the head of, is divided and it will fall. Hey, and that fall is going to be great. And the period point of that fall is going to be those nuclear missiles being fired onto the United States of America. But this is a fair use copyright disclaimer. I do not own any of the footage in this clip, nor do I stand to gain from it monetarily. It is simply for educational purposes.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for being here. Before we begin, please make sure that you subscribe to my channels on YouTube and on Rumble. Like this video, it will help more people see it, and check out my newsletter available on Substack. We have been hearing a lot from the European leaders about the need to, quote, decouple from China and Russia in the context of purchasing cheaper raw materials and natural resources. And while the trade relationships have significantly declined, some of that rhetoric is nothing more than a charade for the misinformed masses. While politicians may not care as much, but the business world knows that cheap materials mean bigger profits and happier stakeholders. Big companies are allowed to find leeways because they are the ones who subsequently support and lobby those in power. Additionally, the details that I'm about to share with you prove that reliance on natural resources cannot be switched on and off. Cheap energy resources enabled Germany's economic boom in the past years, and cheap energy resources also served as the backbone to a comfortable European lifestyle. It would be probably safe to say that the process of decoupling hasn't been going very well, as is evidenced by Europe's rapid economic decline. In a recent article, Financial Times shared that the EU is still buying Russian natural resources, just not from Russia directly. Supplies via third countries hide the EU's true dependence on Russian resources. The report says that Swiss giant Glencore actually shipped thousands of tons of Russian copper to Italy through Turkey this summer. The report also pointed out that the oil and metals trader Glencore, that is based in London, just purchased in excess of 5,000 tons of copper that is produced in Russia. Once again, the shipment came through Turkey and to Italy. Financial Times says that imports of Russian copper by Turkey.
And even though Turkey is in NATO, hey, at some point, Turkey is going to completely turn against the West and ally themselves with Russia. Read Ezekiel chapter 38. Gog, which is Russia, being a guard or an ally, and having joined unto them Gomer, which is speaking of Turkey.
Have nearly tripled to 159,000 tons in the first 7 months of 2023 compared with the same period last year. This is according to Trade Data Monitor. It further reports, Italy has become Turkey's largest export destination for copper, growing 3% this year, compared with steep fails for Germany and the UK. This points to Italy becoming an integral part of the trade route for Russian copper, said experts. When it comes to crude oil products, the story gets even more interesting. For example, Germany, which we've talked about at length before, obviously because of its shocking economic crash. So Germany has been buying fuel, not from Russia, not directly, it's buying fuel from Indian refineries. Now, who does India get its oil from? That's right, India imports crude oil primarily from Russia. Just to show you how complex Glencore's trade supply chain is and that of other countries, Financial Times writes, the shipments were sold to Glencore by a UAE-based entity set up in 2019 and were destined for the Carlo Colombo wire rod factory in Lombardy, northern Italy, to manufacture copper products that go into electric cables, transformers, and electronics.
Choosing what to order is hard.
It's like your
Choosing
damn
which credit
ad.
card to use shouldn't be harder.
Besides copper, Russian resources such as aluminum are shipped virtually the same way. So as you can see, overcoming dependence on Russian resources is, let's just be honest, impossible at this point for Europe. It's not able to pay much higher costs, and now it's buying resources through an intricate, complex supply chain that starts in Russia. European officials are well aware of these new trade routes and commented that trade with Russia through third countries such as Turkey, China, and the UAE is hampering the effectiveness of Western sanctions, which, as we already know, these sanctions backfired in more ways than just one. If it wasn't for these resources shipped from third countries, I wonder how different the situation would be in Europe right now. Likely, it will be much, much worse. The new supply chain approach is effectively hiding the origin of some of the natural resources consumed in.
So as you can see, Europe is just too intertwined with Russia in the East and relying on those natural resources. So that much harder the U.S. pushes to break that relationship, that much farther the U.S. is going to push her European allies against her and towards the East, towards Russia. They got that, what's that saying, well, you had that character in Friday, Big Worm, that said playing with my money is like playing with my emotions. And once you start dealing with what keeps people fed, what keeps their bellies full, what keeps their bank accounts full, hey, that's where issues come into place. Yeah, we can talk about equality and, all that stuff, and everybody comes together and, the good guy West is fighting against the bad guy East. But when people's children are starving, hey, when they're freezing in their houses, that gets people's priorities straightened out real quick. But let's get back into these precepts. This is the book of Obadiah, chapter 1. I'm going to start at verse 1 and jump down to verse 7. And this whole book is dedicated to you, Edomites, and your downfall. As the header reads, Edom will be humbled. The vision of Obadiah, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, concerning Edom. We have heard a rumor from Yahweh, and an ambassador is sent among the heathen. Arise ye, and let us rise up against her in battle. And we're seeing a lot of these nations outside of these outside of this Edomite power structure starting to turn against you, Edomites, and see that you are the root cause of all the problems on the planet right now. And hey, that ambassador that has been sent among the heathen are the men of the Lord, the prophets, out on the highways and byways preaching this word, as well as putting up video epistles online, revealing you Edomites for who you are, the wicked, according to the scriptures, and your demonic practices. And that's pushing that vibration out here to these other nations to get on board and start to condemn you Edomites. Now I'm going to jump down to verse 7, which deals with you American Edomites and your allies turning against you. All the men of thy confederacy, or your allies, have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee, these Western European nations with the U.S., we're on board with putting sanctions on Russia and helping out Ukraine, have deceived thee. Behind the scenes, through third parties, through third countries, we're still doing dealings with Russia and receiving vital natural resources, and prevailed against thee, they that eat thy bread, hey, receiving all that money from the U.S. to keep up NATO and other Western European structures, have laid a wound under thee. Those very same weapons and infrastructure that the U.S. has paid for and, built up in Europe are going to be turned against the U.S. There is none understanding in him. And like I said earlier in the video, what this division is ultimately going to culminate in is at some point during World War III, America's European allies are going to turn against her completely and ally themselves with Russia, and they're all together going to shoot nuclear missiles, 200 million, onto the United States of America, turning it into the biblical lake of fire from sea to shining sea, and then a desolate, uninhabitable wasteland afterwards. Let's get Jeremiah 50 verse 9 real quick. This is Jeremiah chapter 50 verse 9. For lo, I will raise and cause to come up against Babylon, the virgin daughter of Babylon, Babylon the Great, the United States of America, an assembly of great nations from the north country being Russia, because what's north of the U.S., Canada, that Arctic Ocean region, and then Russia. And it's a well-known fact that Russia shooting missiles from itself across the north, as well as from that Arctic Ocean region, which over the last couple of years, Russia has been building back up its military capabilities, nuclear included in that Arctic Ocean region. To reach the U.S. would be the shortest trajectory time for those missiles to reach the U.S. And that assembly of great nations are not just Russia's allies like China, Iran, North Korea, but also America's European allies that are going to turn against her. And they shall set themselves in array against her. From thence she shall be taken. Their arrows shall be as of a mighty expert man. None shall return in vain. Those arrows being symbolic for those nuclear missiles. But now I'm going to close it out in Revelation chapter 17, verse 16. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, the 10 horns referring to the EU or European Union back when it was known as the European Economic Community. And 10 horns, and we can link that back to that Daniel chapter 2. 10 toes, that letter 10 being very important, which thou sawest upon the beast being NATO, and also that iron mixed with miry clay can also go into this. Besides that iron being the stronger nations of this kingdom and the clay being the weaker nations, the iron can also represent NATO, the military aspect of things, and the clay, the weaker part, the economic aspect of things, the European Union, because what enforces, these American and European economic policies on the world, that military aspect, that iron aspect. You don't want to go along with the EU, or especially you don't want to use that petrodollar. You want to get outside of having a central bank in your country or dealing with the IMF or the International Monetary Fund. What do they send in? The military to overthrow your leader and set up a puppet that's going to get back in line. And the 10 horns, the EU, which thou sawest upon the beast, NATO, these shall hate the whore that rides upon the beast. And when you go to the first couple of verses of Revelation 17, it says who that whore is, that's decked in purple and scarlet and fine apparel and has that cup of abominations in her hand. Mystery, Babylon, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, the United States of America. These shall hate the whore, the U.S., and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire, the fire from those nuclear missiles, which is going to turn this place into the biblical lake of fire from sea to shining sea, and then a desolate, uninhabitable wasteland afterwards. And with all this talk in the news of Russia threatening the West with nuclear weapons, and now you've got Iran talking about nukes, and we know that the state of Israel, they There are, whispers in the back about them using nukes. And, China, a report just came out talking about how by 2030, which with the way things are looking, and Abaratazar, we won't make it to 2030. China's going to have 1,000 operational nuclear weapons, which I believe right now they just reached having 500 operational nuclear capable weapons. Hey, we can see the talks of nukes, World War III, Armageddon, are in the air, because these are the times we're living in when these prophecies of the end, the prophecies of great destruction, are coming to their fulfillment. So that's it with this video. And with this video, I hope you sincere Akim and Akwath were edified. Just keep strong. As we can clearly see, we are almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babol, Kwam Yasharala, and until next time, Shalom.